This is an interview with Ms. Doris Miles for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is March 14, 1997. Ms. Miles, I want to thank you for coming, taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today about Birmingham, growing up in Birmingham, about the movement. What we're attempting to do is simply develop a general history of what Birmingham was like in those early days. Let me just ask you, were you born in Birmingham?
Yes, I was born in Birmingham, and I was born in the house that I now presently live in.
Oh, okay. Well, now that's a rarity. You've gone away, gone to college here in Birmingham, and then you did a couple of summers at Tuskegee.
Yes.
And so you was one of those rarities that stayed at home, where a lot of folk have moved away from home. So you need to be commended for that.
Well, what I did begin work here, but then I moved away.
I see.
I did move away for a time,
Right.
and then I retired, now returned.
Okay. Well, there's no place like home. That's what they
That's
always
right.
say. So you
That's
return
right.
home. Where were your parents from?
My mother was born in Pike County, Alabama. And at that time, they were farmers. They were sharecropper farmers.
Okay.
My father, I don't know his origin.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get to meet a lot of his people. I only knew his niece and cousins and a stepson.
Right. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have one brother.
One brother. Is he older or younger?
He's 2 years older than I am.
2 years older. Okay. And what community did you live in growing up here in Birmingham?
I grew up on Enon Ridge, and Enon Ridge was a very special community. And that's why when you were a little amazed at my being born in the house in which I lived, because at that time, we had several doctors in the community, and I was delivered by a doctor that lived right around the corner from me, a Dr. Hutchinson, and his two sons are also now outstanding doctors.
Oh, is that right?
And Enon Ridge was a community, I would say upper class Black people, because they included professionals and business people, although there were other people in the community too. But because of the makeup of professional people and business people, it made the climate different, because then everybody worked toward a goal. Most of those people on Enon Ridge were homeowners, and this, of course, too, made a difference. And one of the ladies represented out in Kelly Ingram Park, Carrie Tuggle. I attended Carrie Tuggle School.
Right.
And Mrs. Tuggle made a big difference also in the community of Enon Ridge by establishing that institute. And there were so many people on Enon Ridge, we rarely had to go out of our community for services. And this is why today I still believe in supporting Black businesses, because we had businesses in our own community that provided jobs and provided services that we needed, services such as even shoe repair. We had several dentists in our community. Dr. Taggart was my neighbor, and we had Dr. Boykin, and I understand Dr. Boykin has a son now who is still a practicing dentist in Birmingham. And we had one of the first Black superintendents of Jefferson County school system, Dr. E. Paul Jones, who lived right across the street from me, and of course his wife and all these other families. And I have to mention Dr. A.G. Gaston, as I also claim him as a son of Enon Ridge, because Dr. Gaston was one of the outstanding pupils of Mrs. Carrie Tuggle, and he attended Carey Tuttle Institute before it became a public school. And I was inspired to a lot going to Tuttle School because Dr. Gaston often visited the school, and tried to talk encouraging and say encouraging words and everything, But at that time, it really didn't dawn upon me why he was so special and, and why he was so fond of coming back to Tuttle. But then later, when you learn that he, attended the institute and everything like that. And we had so many businesses in the neighborhood. See, we're in the larger community of Smithfield. And we had an ice house, which employed a lot of people, and this was operated by Mr. Commons.
Commons.
Yes, Commons Ice House. And then another famous person that came in terms of Birmingham and its history was Emerald Jackson. Emerald Jackson was also an outstanding leader from Enid Ridge. And we also had all of your funeral home operators in Birmingham originally came from Enid Ridge. And I named just a few. Dr. Gaston, I'll start with Dr. Gaston. And also there was a connection between the Chambers Funeral Home now, which operates in Bessemer. And of course, Protective Industrial Insurance Company. That family originated from Enid Ridge. And also in the printing industry, I have to mention the furnaces. The furnaces lived on Enid Ridge. We just had so many outstanding people on Enid Ridge. I could really sit here.
You could talk all day.
I could really just sit and talk all day. Like you said, I could talk all day about Enid Ridge. And they made it special, and everybody was just concerned about everything and the well-being of the community and everything like that. Just a wonderful environment. And the people, like I said, were more fortunate in terms of economic circumstances than a lot of communities. And because now I'm saying this, now my father was an associate minister at 16th Street Baptist Church. Now, but now we were not rich, and of course there were people
What
around
kind
us.
of work did he do? Work outside of the church as well?
Yes, my father was an insurance writer, and he worked for, I think it was Atlanta Life, but that was in my early years, and most of the time I remember him working for North Carolina Mutual. Okay. And he wrote quite a bit of insurance, I understand, because I think the year that I was born, he wrote so much insurance, they gave him a trip to the World's Fair in New York that year. And that was his line of business. Did
your mother work outside of the home?
Yes, my mother did domestic work, and she also wrote a little insurance too, but nothing, her insurance writing was not to the extent of my father's insurance writing. But the people were well-to-do, in fact, and it was amazing that a lot of those black people, they had maid service, but unfortunately we didn't have maid service because I didn't like housework.
That was your job.
Yes.
Well, what was it like then growing up in that community as a child? What kinds of things did you do? What kind of recreation did you have?
Okay. We hadn't supervised recreation in the community because when Tuttle School was closed for the summer, they had recreational programs where people who work with in different sports activities in the city, in the school system, would come up on the campus and they would be supervising activities that you would do, baseball. We had a little wading pool up there too that we learned how to swim, and they used to play horseshoes, and that was an adult. We had adult supervision.
In Enid Ridge?
Huh?
Was there a park in Enid Ridge?
No, we used the school ground.
I see.
Okay.
What do you remember about your attendance at Tuttle? Is there anything that stands out in your mind about when you started the Tuttle School? That's where you started first grade, right?
Yes, right.
What do you remember about Tuttle School?
Well, at first, I felt kind of bad when I first entered school because I didn't learn how to read as fast as I should. And after the first grade, I couldn't read like I wanted to, and that disturbed me very much. And when I got to the fourth grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Foster, and who used, I guess, the phonetic system. And under Mrs. Foster, I learned how to read. And then from that moment on, that was all I wanted to do, was to learn how to read. And from that moment on, I started, I succeeded in most. I might not have been an A plus, but I did quite well in most of my things. And the teachers gave us a lot of independence. They gave us responsibility. They did not have to supervise us at every minute. We were given responsibilities. I will never forget, another schoolmate of mine, Claudine, and I were given the responsibility of taking up money, in the lunchroom. As the other students came in, we sold the lunch tickets and things of that nature. And we were responsible for the money and, collecting it, counting it after we had finished for the day. And I was often in plays. I never will forget that, because that increased my memory and my ability to learn, and which carried over into any type of school activity. Because if you want to pass tests, you're going to have to learn how to memorize. And the material has to be able to come to you. And that's what being able to memorize did for me.
Right.
And Tulsa School, we had activities. We had speakers to come to us, to inspire us. And Dr. Gasson, of course, was one of those. And we had entertainers who would come in. And
But after you left Tugger, then you went on to Parker.
right.
Were you active in extracurricular activities at Parker?
No, because at that time that I was attending Parker, my activities, my time for activities was generally taken, because on Saturday and Sunday, I was a musician and I was playing for a church. And so therefore, I wanted to join the Parker High School choir. And I would practice with the Parker High School choir, but I know that I really couldn't join because they would have, trips. And I know my responsibilities at that time involved my church.
Well, Parker, of course, is world renowned for any number of things. What do you most remember about your experiences at Parker?
I remember the outstanding visitors that would come to Parker.
Do
And-
you remember any particular ones that would come?
I remember a King family that came. These were musicians, and
But there you
I
always
think
had assembly programs, and different people would come in to
Yes.
speak to inspire the students and all.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Parker, of course, was a rival to every other school, in fact, but particularly in football and basketball, was always very well known. And you always had some very good athletes from the school, but you've also had people from Parker who excel in all areas.
Right.
So that's why it has been so well known. Now, you finished Parker, and what did you do after graduating from Parker High School?
Well, see, like I said, growing up on Eden Ridge, I knew that I always had an objective, and my objective was to always go to college. And if you couldn't didn't get a big scholarship, then you had to go to somebody's college. So that was the aim,
Mm-hmm.
So when I graduated from Parker High School, then I went to Miles College.
And how was that transition from high school to college?
Well, I liked it very much because it was a big transition. Because see, Parker High School was a big school with all these thousands of students.
Right.
And I went to Miles College. Miles College was a small school. It was like a family environment. You got to know the teachers, and they got to know you. And it was just a beautiful relationship at Miles College with the teachers because there was a respect. They respected the students respected the teachers. And the teachers could socialize with the students and still be respected. And when you went in that teacher's classroom, you were still respected that teacher. Although on the weekend, you could go to a ball and dance all night, and the same environment, but still was respect. And we had our organizations at that time on Miles College. We had only one sorority at that time, and that was our Order Phi Lambda. But of course, the young men had the fraternities, But we had selective organizations, and at Miles College, I was a member of Club Row Nu. And Row Nu stands for Reigning Noble Women.
Okay.
So I enjoyed Miles College very much, and I enjoyed the social activities, but of course I knew that I had to maintain at least a passing average, if not the best, but at least maintain a passing average, because that was what I was there for.
What was your major?
I majored in elementary education.
During the time that you were there, from 56 to 60, was some rather turbulent times in the state of Alabama. In 1956, of course, is when the NACP was outlawed from operating in the state, and then the Alabama Christian Movement was organized. And then there were demonstrations in various areas, from about segregated schools to lack of black policemen. Were you involved in any of those activities prior to the demonstrations of '63? Do you remember when the Freedom Riders, for instance, came in? I guess that was the sit-ins first. Sit-ins started in 1960, and then the Freedom Rides. And of course, then in 1962, Miles College students were involved in demonstrations downtown. By then, you were out of college. What did you do after college?
After I graduated from Miles, I immediately started working. I was employed by the Jefferson County school system, and that's when I started working at Winona. Now, during that time, before the Alabama Christian Movement and the Union, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we had started boycotting the Birmingham merchants because at that time we realized that they were not hiring black people as clerks, sales clerks. The only way that you could work downtown Birmingham was in the back. And at that time, we started those boycotts. And I know at Easter time, they would schedule a boycott, and they would ask anybody not to buy anything. And we had, of course, militant young people at that time, and some of them took it on themselves. If they caught you downtown, they would snatch your packages. But I think they had almost 90% cooperation from black people at that particular Easter time, that the people did not buy.
Right.
And that was really amazing because, we like to dress up, especially on Easter time, but the people cooperated. And that was one of the earlier things that started in the movement. And at that time, too, I was also a member of the NAACP at that time.
Well, were you a registered voter?
Oh, yes, let me mention about my registration to vote. At that time, they required passing a written test, and you also had to pass an interview. The written test was not hard. I passed it. And when I went in for the interview, I think they asked me about 3 questions. And of course, I gave them the correct answers. So therefore, I was able to, that's how I became able to register and vote. But it was that long process at that time. It was just not just filling out an application.
Do you remember if you were at Miles at the time, or was it after you had finished Miles College?
I'm sure that must have been while I was at Miles College.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Then you started teaching at Winona Elementary School.
Right.
Was Mr. Biddens still the
Yes,
principal?
Mr. Biddens was principal.
And how long did you remain at Winona?
I was at Winona 7 years.
Okay. That's my old alma mater. I attended Winona Elementary School
Oh, okay, okay.
from
And,
6th through 8th.
From what?
6th through 8th grade.
Oh, but then you should have been, what year were you there?
Oh, you were, I was way gone when you got there. I
Oh,
finished
really?
Winona High School in 61.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I went to Winona High School in 57.
Okay.
So you were just on that Miles at the time.
Oh, okay,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. What were the circumstances of your getting involved in the movement?
Okay, like I said, that's the town of Eden Ridge. People on Eden Ridge work, I've always been concerned about the community and Birmingham as a whole. And people in the neighborhood, we were just taught, about things that's going on and discuss what's happening in the news. And that's how the neighbors all got together. And that's how Mrs. Smith and some of my other neighbors, my mother and Mrs. Rucker and neighbors, and we just got together. When we heard about this movement and these meetings, and you say, well, we are going to go and be involved, and we're going to find out what's going on. And that's how we got started.
So you started going to the
Right.
mass meetings.
Right.
How would you describe a mass meeting?
The mass meeting was one of, I would say, high intensity. Because first of all, you had Carlton Reese is an outstanding musician. And of course you had these outstanding ministers, Reverend Woods, and all the local ministers who would talk. And you would listen to them, and they're fiery speakers. And then you would get involved with this music with that good gospel sound that Carlton Reese had. And so then you were sitting there and you really carried into this whole movement thing, because you have seen and you have been victimized by all this stuff all your life. And so somebody stand there and said, now is the time. So then you said to yourself, now is the time. And then, you are worked up into an emotional frenzy. And then if you were ever in the churches when Dr. King came in, and Dr. King, everybody would stand as soon as he entered that church. Stand. And the first time I saw Dr. King, I will never forget it. I said to myself, surely there has to be something about this man. This man had a persona that you could feel. It was something electric that you felt. You could feel the vibrations coming from this man. And as he all surrounded him, and you knew that man was selected for a purpose. And that was before he became a Nobel Peace awardee and all of these things, but it was something that let you know that man is great. And I have always looked back on that moment, and I said, well, you know what? I said, the Lord placed me there so I could even be in the presence of that great man.
So he sort of electrified people,
Yes.
and there was, like you say, a persona about him that attracted people. And so that, in fact, was one of the reasons for success, then, I would say, of the movement. Now, as you attended those, the mass meetings, did you attend many of them?
Yes. Yes, in fact, we were very involved and very concerned about what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we would attend when they got in the midst of this environment where they were marching every day. See, they had meetings every night.
Right.
And we attended every night.
Every night. How did you get to the meetings?
You see, like I had a car, I was driving.
Okay.
And so then anybody who wanted to go, we just all piled in the car and we met.
Do you remember your first demonstration?
I remember the first time that they marched, but I did not march with them that day. That first day, I think that they marched with the Christian movement and the Southern Christian leadership. They left from St. James Baptist Church. the St. James Baptist Church was right down the street from my church, which was Thurgood. And it was one Sunday afternoon, they were gonna march downtown. And of course, the city of Birmingham had denied them permission to march. And I, of course, wanted to be there. And the people got ready to march. And here comes the Birmingham Police Department to let you know that you're not going to march. And that day, they marched down that street, and they had the dogs. They had those German Shepherd dogs. They had them lined up like you would line up soldiers. And the thing that I found amusing is that they had the audacity to have a big black dog leading the pack.
Mm-hmm.
And those dogs looked very vicious. And they did not turn them loose that Sunday, you know. But then they arrested the people and carried them to jail. Now, I did not march during the day, but I attended the meetings. I said I was working, so I couldn't attend, you know, the march. The only time another time that I marched one time at night. We marched from St. James downtown. And I did march another time. At that time, the city jails had become filled with the school children. And that particular Sunday, we were meeting at New Pilgrim Baptist Church with Reverend Smith. And so in the midst of the meeting, they decided, I think on the spur of the moment, I guess they did it, I think that was a maneuver to do that. But somehow the police department was still ready. They said, let's march down to the city jail and hold a prayer meeting across the street for those children in the jail.
In Memorial Park.
Okay, so at that time, well, I was dressed. I had gone from my church, and I had on my spike heel shoes. It was a good thing I thought y'all was young at the time. And I said, well, I'm not going back. I said, I'm here, and I'm going to march too. And we marched over to the city jail. And when we got to the city jail, Bill Connor was there, and Bill Connor had his firemen and policemen there. And he said, stop. And at that time, we were across the street in the park like they were in front of the jail. And somehow or another, something was not pleasing to Bill Connor, and he got angry about something. I don't know what it was. And then he ordered the fireman, he said, turn on the hose. And it was an amazing thing. That was the most amazing incident. That man stood there as if he was frozen in time, and he could not move. He did not bat an eye. He did not move a finger. He just stood there. And I guess poor Bill Connor, he was so upset by the man that fired him that he just acted like he was frozen too, you know, because nobody probably defied him. But that was an amazing thing, though. That man did not turn on that hose.
Did he attempt to turn it on?
No. He just stood there like he was frozen. I guess it was an amazing thing to see.
So, what if you were to explain to children today what you felt like on a march? What would you tell them?
Well, you felt, all of us, I think, anybody who was involved in the movement, felt that you were involved in a great movement. And it was a thing that you knew that the time had come. That it was a time to stand up for principles. And that even though it might mean that something might happen to you when you stood up, but you knew that it would be worth your effort to stand up and be counted, because, hey, you know that what we've been going through is wrong.
Well, as you grew up in Birmingham as a young woman, were you ever confronted with
By police, other whites who would basically show disrespect to you because you were black?
Yes, there were many incidents. For instance, like if you went downtown to a store, there sometimes was an attitude that they did not want you to try on clothes. And this was an attitude that you could pick up. Of course, like I explained to the other young lady I was speaking to earlier, that one thing that really disturbed me as a child, we used to ride by the state fairground. And at that time, the state fairground was a beautiful place. And you would pass by and you would see the beautiful Ferris wheels and you would see all the lights of the carnival and circus and everything. And then, of course, you knew that because you were black, you couldn't go in there. And that bothered me every time I would pass by and see all these things, and that really disturbed me. But the only thing that kept me from being affected by this negative attitude was that to understand you got it home. So, hey, listen, we are in this segregated system, but you are no different from anybody else, whether they are white and they're living in Birmingham, or whether they're white and living in Ireland or England. Because my mother had a little statement that she told me once, you know what? She said, well, you know what? All people have to step in their pants the same way. And this was the thing, and the school reinforced the same thing. Our teachers were black. They taught you about black people who were doing well and who succeeded in spite of all this odds and negativity, and that you could too succeed.
You were at Winona for 7 years. What did you do after you left Winona?
After I left Winona, then at that time I had started my graduate work. And I started my graduate work at Tuskegee University. And at that time they did not offer what I wanted to, so I transferred and applied at the University of Alabama. And at that time I was in educational psychology and with a concentration in reading to become a reading specialist. And at that time, while I was there, then I wanted to get into the reading field. And they have like bulletin boards for employment. And I happened to look at the board and I checked to see if they had need of a reading specialist at Miles College. And I applied for that job. And after that, that's when I started working at Miles College.
So how long were you at Miles?
I was at Miles College 3 years.
What was your experience like at Alabama? Because this is mid-60s.
Right.
So,
Well, there were not many blacks there, of course, at that time. I found that the younger blacks, the undergraduate students, most of them did not stay at the university because they were younger and they were going through a social adaptation period. And of course, they didn't have, other students to socialize with, so they probably felt isolated. But the only people that could stay at the university at that time and do well were those people like myself who were graduate students. And so we had already been out working and everything. We were grounded, and when we went back, we were there for a different purpose,
Did you commute or did you live on campus?
During the summer, I lived on campus. And it was a very good environment. Most people were very nice. And like I said, we went to the cafeteria. They offered you as much as you wanted to eat. And they made sure that you didn't have any negative things involved with that. And I remember the time, it's just kind of comical. They had what we call a watermelon cutting. And I think I was like the only black student at that time that came from the dormitory down to the watermelon cutting. And, they had a whole truck full of watermelons. And they were just piled up there. And, everybody just ate a little watermelon, and I ate as much as I wanted to. But it just amazed me how much they had, and there was nobody to eat it. I said, oh Lord, and I think about that now,
When you were on the back student.
Yes, and they had cultural activities for us. The only incident I had at the University of Alabama, native, was that I noticed that I went in the bathroom one morning, and there was this great big rebel flag standing hanging over the bathroom shower.
Had it been there previously? Or
No,
just...
no, it was just there. It was there that day. The rebel flag infuriates me. I become furious when I see it.
Why?
And so I said,
Why do you become furious when you see the rebel flag? What does it mean?
Because it stands for white supremacy. That's what it represents, and that's what it represented all my life. And I saw it, and it infuriated me. So it did not occur to me to report this to the head person of the dormitory. I took it on my own hands to handle it. So what I did, I took this rebel flag and I put it down on the floor of the shower, and I proceeded to take my shower with that rebel flag at my feet. And that's where I left it. I left it right in there. So that ended that incident of the rebel flag. I didn't see the rebel flag anymore. As long as I was there, I never saw the rebel flag anymore.
We should have sent you to Montgomery, and you could have handled that one down there that flew at the Capitol for so long. But you didn't have any other difficulties with that after that?
No, the only other thing, I felt that one of my professors, I felt that I deserved an A, but I received a B. But since it was a B, I didn't complain about it. And I didn't really complain about it because the grading was like a subjective type of thing. And so that was the cue to it. You see, if it had been left up to just plain test work, that would be different. But we did have a subjective point where she could inject her own, feelings into it, because we had to stand before the class and make a presentation on that, subjective.
How was the experience then going back to your alma mater to work at Miles?
Very good. Very good. In fact, because the turnover at Miles College in terms of the faculty was so great that there wasn't hardly any of those people that taught me at Miles College, only one or two at that time when I returned.
So what position did you hold at Miles?
I was a reading specialist, and I was with a special government funded program. It was called College Education Achievement Project, and it was designed to equip incoming freshmen who might be lacking in certain areas to give them concentrated work so that they might be able to succeed in doing their college work. And it was federally funded, and like I said, that was a very inspiring position, because the government gave us money that we could order any kind of equipment that we wanted. We could order any kind of material that we wanted. And they even encouraged us to become members of professional organizations. And I joined the International Reading Association. And we had all kind of equipment, all kind of material, so I could equip my reading laboratory with anything that I wanted. Any book that I picked up and I said, oh, this is a good reading equipment, I could order it, And of course, that went through the approval of the dean of the college at that time. And I attended the International Reading Association, and of course, my fare was paid, my hotel was paid, and of course, at that time, I only flew first class. And I attended meetings in Boston, and I attended meetings in Anaheim, California, and that gave me more insight into my field, because when I went to those meetings, I got a chance to talk with those people who write those textbooks in reading, and talk with the people who have done research in reading. and then to learn of their techniques. And I also learned that not only did we just have a problem at Miles College, but they were also having problems at Boston University. Children coming out of school ill-equipped, to deal in those areas.
Let me ask you, just back up just a minute. Living on Eden Ridge, really it's sort of adjacent to what was turned Dynamite Hill. Do you remember any of the bombings that took place?
Yes, I remember the bombings of Attorney Shores' house. And I greatly admire Attorney Shores because he was one of those pioneers that we had. And he was the only lawyer that we had, say, to turn to in those early days, that if we had a special problem, but we need that special somebody in our corner. But he was there. And when his home was blown, because we're living in close proximity, when that bomb is thrown, that shakes the ground. So where we live, we could feel the vibration. The same thing when they on 16th Street Church, I was standing in my yard and I felt that ground shaking. And I said, oh, that's 16th Street Church. And Attorney Shores' house.
Wait a minute. You said at that point that is 16th Street Church. How did you know that was 16th Street?
I don't know, it's just an insight. Because the 16th Street was involved so much, in the marches and everything. Yes.
There was some anticipation from the bombing of the church. You thought that had been anticipated by people because of its involvement?
But no, I never would have thought that they would bomb a church.
Mm-hmm.
They had bombed homes.
Right.
Oh, they had a good time doing that. And like I said, they bombed Attorney Shores' house. And like I said, as close as we were to it, sometime by the time we got there, they would have the areas roped off, and they wouldn't let you see. They want to keep you away, They didn't really want you to see the damage,
You left Birmingham and moved to New York. What did you do in New York?
When I went to New York, I thought I was going to get involved in teaching, but at that time they were not hiring teachers. So I then went to the employment agency. And they have files where you just look at jobs. And I saw the job for an employment counselor. And I read the description, and I liked that. I sent in an application, and I went to my girlfriend's house, and I told her, I said, I found just the job I want. And so I put in other applications, but that was the job that I wanted. And I kept on waiting. And I didn't have to wait, I think about a month or so, and they sent me the material to come in for an interview. And my girlfriend said she was most amazed. She said, that's the first time I have ever seen anybody just get the job that they really want.
Mm-hmm.
And
you spent 20 years
in New York.
Did you work there for 20 years?
I worked there 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we had a big change in procedure. Now, when I went in, I was a counselor. And at that time, they were also funded by government, money from the federal government. So they too had a special program. And at that time, they were hiring, at the time that I went in, so they did not have black counselors. So then they had this new program, new government money. So that's when they came in and they wanted black counselors because they wanted to put us into that hardcore area out there of Harlem so that we could put in the young black people and get them involved in training. So see, that was the emphasis at that time.
They also had to comply with governmental regulations by getting black counselors, I'm sure. Why did you eventually decide to return to Birmingham?
Okay, I decided to come back to Birmingham. I had always planned to return to Birmingham. I started changing physically. And I felt myself being weak. And I kept going to the doctor, telling him, I said, I feel that something is wrong with me. And in New York, we have a lot of subways. And when you come out of the subway, you have to climb a lot of steps. And I would find myself unable to climb those steps without being completely out of breath and having to stop. And I knew that something was wrong. I kept going to the doctor. But something is wrong with me. They said, well, we don't see anything wrong. I said, you look fine. I said, but it has nothing to do with the way I look. I said, I know that there's something wrong. And I kept getting sicker and sicker. And I know one day I went to a job at this school. And by the time I got in the door of the school, there was a seat there by the door. And I just could barely make it to that seat and sit down. I couldn't even get to the classroom. So at that time, they had a nurse in the school. So then she took my blood pressure and everything. And I sat there, and then I felt better, and I was able to go to the classroom. But this led to my being sick, and then I became unable to work. And through examination and everything, they found out that I had pernicious anemia. And they told me that the federal government would allow me to retire if I had pernicious anemia. And so with the years that I had worked, then I had enough years with the federal government to retire.
So you came back home.
So that's when I decided to come back to Birmingham. And I was so enlightened by the progress that Birmingham had made. And I was delighted that they had a black male, and a black male who had also been my instructor in Miles College.
So upon your return to Birmingham, then you realized that Birmingham had changed for the better, you think?
Oh yes, definitely so.
And
Because of the job opportunities now. I have returned to Birmingham and I see blacks and whites working together in various businesses and being treated fairly. And I see so many improvements in the city of Birmingham. Just to look at the beautiful shrubbery, the beautiful trees, in Birmingham. And then the climate in Birmingham, where you now have such things as city stages. You have the Birmingham Festival of Arts. And there are so many activities going on in Birmingham that it's really an interesting place to be. The only thing you need to attend all these things is money.
Well, I sure want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, Ms. Miles, and sitting and talking. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to just leave with us?
Well, the only thing that I would like to say is that for posterity is that people, oftentimes they want to change the society. They don't like what's going on. And they bombard this and present their ideas and change and everything like this. But my philosophy is that the only way that you can improve society is to improve yourself. And as the Army said, be the best that you can be, and then make the change that way. And another word that I have to say is that in going through life, I always identify with positive things, whether that be positive people, positive organizations, and positive businesses, and never look at society in terms of solving it through a negative position, but it must always come from a positive position.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.